Ladies and gentlemen, if you clicked on this video because the title is intriguing, well, I can tell you the story behind that title is intriguing as well. The words Electrocuting Chopin do not come from my pen, but from the pen of William Mason, 1901. He was at this time a famous American composer and pianist who wrote a book in 1901 with his recollections of meetings he had with the great of the 19th century, Moscheles, Liszt, Wagner and others. And it's in that context that he wrote these legendary words, Electrocuting Chopin, because apparently that was what people were doing, according to him, with music of Chopin. And to illustrate that, we're going to have a look or a listen to Daniel Trifonov's Chopin's Scherzo in C-sharp minor and compare that to the recording that Alberto Sanna made. So my partner in crime, I would say, at the piano for the Beethoven symphonies. But first of all, do me a big favor, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. That helps big time in the algorithm and also helps me building this channel to a community of 100,000. That is really my dream. And much love to my Patreons. They make it possible that I record this video for you on a Friday afternoon. There's a link to my Patreon page in the description box as well. We have so much cool stuff there. Besides a cool community, we have updates, we have hangouts, we have podcasts. And if you want to have a glimpse of such a podcast, there's also a link to my email list. If you subscribe to that, you will not only get notifications of all the cool stuff we're releasing, but also as a welcome gift, one of those podcasts for free, so to check out if that is something for you. With that out of the way, let's go to Mr. Mason. But first, I want to say thank you to Nikhil of the Nikhil Hogan Show. He was the one in an interview that actually mentioned Mason, and I knew the book, but I forgot that it was so intriguing. And so I checked again, thanks to Nick. So check out his channel show. It's mostly about Partimento and all that good stuff, but he also talks to other people, like, for instance, me. There is I think, a very good interview that he did with me here on his YouTube channel. Also, there is an interview with Alberto further on and an older one with me as well. So a lot of cool stuff there. Subscribe to his channel and say hello from my part. So now let's read what Mr. Mason had to say about Chopin performances in 1901. So he wrote in 1901 this book on his recollection with the greatest persons on earth in musical terms living at the time. Just scrolling to his contents here, it's just amazing. He met Meyerbeer, he met Liszt, he was actually studying with Liszt, he was a student of Moscheles. Of course, Moscheles knew Beethoven very much, and Chopin. Schumann he met, he visited Wagner. All the people that we would love, we would die almost to meet, well, he met. And so in 1901, he wrote this book, and in the contents, we also see a piece here about Electrocuting Chopin, and that's an intriguing title, right? So you all know, and if you're new here, I will update you very quickly, that I've made the point over and over again that contrary to what many musicologists and especially musicians, conductors say today, that in the course of the 19th century, tempos of classical music, the Beethovens and the Schumanns and earlier music, actually slowed down because of the so-called Wagner effect. Wagner, with his so-called romanticism, slowed down everything. And we have to speed it up today because we believe today that those metronome marks were meant to be read as we do today. So one click of the metronome represents today the note value in that metronome mark. If you take that option, if you take that perspective, you run into massive problems. What we do here, we introduced the WBMP, the whole beat metronome practice, in which you just take two ticks for one, the back and forth, the left and right, just as physicists still today read their pendulums, 1 and 2. If you do that, you get a complete different notion. Then you start seeing the sources in the 19th century that tempos of the earlier 19th century, the mid-19th century, were speeding up drastically, and it's not a little bit. There were sources, we've given that also, our book will actually come back to that massively, of course. Those sources, they do not lie. They are crystal clear about the fact that musicians in the 19th century sped up music above and beyond all these metronome marks, of which we today do not understand how people could play them in the first place, let alone play them even much faster, so much faster that people even were writing like barbaric performances. Or, in 1901, electrocuting Chopin. So this source of William Mason is just one of those sources, quite late, 1901, that fits into that row of sources of the 19th century, eyewitnesses of the time that were writing about this evolution of playing faster and faster and faster. And so in 1901, Mason, based upon his recollections and memories of meetings with the Liszts, with the Moscheles people who really saw Chopin, wrote this. And recalling Liszt's playing, and cannot help noticing the marked difference in modern rates of tempo as compared with those which were considered authentic 50 years ago. Mason is gonna make very sure what he means by that. He's saying Liszt played much slower compared to what he heard in 1901. And that shouldn't be a surprise to you, because I've been given sources from Rosenthal, a student of Liszt, another student of Liszt, but also from Charles-Marie Widor, the famous French organist, even in 1934, who wrote this in his memoirs that Liszt played so much slower. He played Beethoven almost twice as slow as people were playing Beethoven in the 1930s. So we know that Liszt didn't play as fast as we today think he did. Okay, that's one point. This is noticeable, he said, in many of Chopin's compositions, especially larger ones, such as the sonatas, balladas, fantasies, and, for instance, scherzos, as we are going to have a look at, with all of which I'm very familiar, having heard them played not only by Liszt in Weimar, but in other German cities and by artists of the highest ranks, many of whom were contemporaries and personal friends of Chopin. For instance, Moscheles, his teacher. So they all seem to adopt a certain rate of speed as if in conformity with the composer's intention. And that's important, this statement, because if you look at metronome marks given by these people, by the Moscheles and others, for instance, Moscheles especially has given a lot of metronome marks of earlier music. If you look at those and you compare them with Chopin, they are pretty similar. And that's important because there was a kind of remembrance of how music was played. Not necessarily that reflected on how music was played on stage, because there were also the demands of an audience. But when people like Moscheles and others published scores with metronome marks, Hans von Bülow, for instance, as well, a student of Liszt, all these metronome marks are in a certain range comparable to each other. So Mason noticed that they all seemed to adopt a certain rate of speed, and they all were in conformity with the composer's intention or with each other. And again, just compare these metronome marks by the teachers of Mason with those left by Chopin, and you will see there is not really a difference. Dreischock and Liszt had often heard the composer play his own pieces and must certainly have been familiar at least with his rates of tempo. Of course, I mean, Liszt didn't reject Chopin's metronome marks of the etudes, right? I was very close to the Chopin day, having been in Germany only a few months when he died, so he didn't meet Chopin obviously anymore. Two of my teachers and nearly all of them, of the musicians I had met, were his contemporaries and had heard him play his own compositions. I certainly ought to have the Chopin tradition. So he's actually saying, like, the teachers I had, and probably he's mentioning Moscheles and Liszt, they were so acquainted with Chopin, they knew him, they played his music to me, and so in spite of the fact that I didn't hear Chopin playing, I can say in good faith that what I recollect from these days, from what I've heard them playing, I have a very good memory of the tradition of Chopin. And so that is a knowledge I'm going to use to reflect upon the performances of 1901, and that's now coming. So what does he say about that? Electrocuting Chopin. The question is, should Chopin be played in accordance with the spirit of the time in which he lived? Should his works be played in the tempo in which he played them? Or because electricity has brought about so many changes and has enabled us to do so many things much more rapidly than formerly, should Chopin's music be electrified or, as it seems to me, electrocuted? Well, That's an excellent question, and it's an important question. People often talk about tradition. We have recordings by students, whatever. We already see here not a direct eyewitness or ear witness of Chopin, but very close, saying like there is nothing left of Chopin. They're electrocuting Chopin in 1901. This was even before the acoustical recordings we have. So if you hear Paderewski play, that's later. So if we refer to, for instance, Paderewski or Cortot, those people are generations later than Mason. And so saying that what we hear them play reflect automatically the tradition of the mid-19th century is absolutely besides the fact. You can reconstruct that so easily. The question here by Mason is super interesting. Why? Because he is putting that question in a context as if we can have a debate upon that. If you today go on stage in a symposium or like lectures or whatever, a discussion, a debate, a conversation with other people and say, hey, just saying like, maybe we can play Chopin much different compared to his intentions. Well, I don't think that a lot of people by instinct today will say like, yeah, hell, yes, let's do that. I mean, whatever with his intentions, I think people generally most people want really a reconstruction or be truthful to the intentions, at least have the intention to be truthful to the intentions of the composer. And so what he's asking here is like, okay, electricity has brought us so much. The music has changed. So maybe we should also allow this evolved performance practice. Well, I've news for you. In 1901, that was already happening. There were no more echoes of Chopin's time. And the reason that Mason wrote this at the very end of his life is probably to say to his generation or the next generation, hey, be careful, because we might have lost something. If I'm gone in a few years, they didn't know that, but it would happen eventually, then who's going to say to the future generations that what we hear today in 1901 is so much over a threshold in terms of tempo that it has nothing to do anymore with Chopin? That's the reason why he wrote that. So I think there is a general tendency to play the rapid movements in Chopin, and in fact in all composers, not of the extreme modern type, too fast. All composers, so the entire 19th century, the rapid movements, people played them way too fast. Electrocuted music. Those are strong words. The examples with Trifonov and Alberto, they will put all of this in context. Just bear with me a little bit. To play these movements rapidly, and then he gives like, okay, if you want to speed up the tempo, then you have to, of course, have the technique, and you have every note should be clear, every phrase should be clear, and actually, like, okay, you can speed up. So he's not opposed to that, but there is a certain threshold in which there is an end. So, anyways, he also made the comment the opposite. I should say that, because otherwise people would run to the comment box. Like, nor should the tempo be too slow. Slow movements are effective, but sufficient animation prevail to impart life and fervorance to the music. That is something that people will certainly take today on all levels. Like, okay, but that proves that whole bit is not possible, because if you play slow movements, then the tempo becomes so slow, then you see that and there's nothing effective anymore. Well, the problems of tempo, of metronome marks and slow movements is as big as in fast movements. It's also not my words. Already Peter Stadlen, he is actually writing that in 1977 in a paper on Beethoven's metronome marks. But more importantly, many of the slow movements of that classical repertoire, including Chopin nocturnes, are played in a tempo very close, if not spot on whole beat. He also made a beautiful remark of tempo rubato about the Chopin C-sharp minor scherzo. That's the reason why I pulled up Dana Trifonov scherzo. But we are going to talk about this passage in another video. Otherwise, this video would become too long. But this is very interesting. We're not going to forget about that. So now let's see what the implication is of this 1901 source of witness by William Mason, on reality. And so in order to make things easier for you, I even created a beautiful overview in my excellent handwriting. But I wanted to give you a little bit of an anchor, to follow the story. So we have Mason, 1901. He says, okay, people are electrocuting Chopin. Why? Because his music is played too fast, right? That's a story we just read. And it's important to notice that it's too fast compared to his intention. That's a super important connection. It's not too fast compared to William Mason's taste. No, it's too fast compared to his intention. How did he know that? Because of the contemporaries of Chopin who he studied with and who told him that. And so the question is, like, for this scherzo, what is his tempo? We don't have metronome marks for this scherzo. So we rely on contemporaries, which makes this scherzo even the more interesting to look at. So we have Kulak. This is a score we're going to use also to check, to follow along when these guys, Alberto and Daniil, are playing. But Kulak, student of Czerny, was someone who gave a lot of metronome marks comparable to Moscheles. And if you compare Kulak's metronome marks with those of Chopin or Moscheles or Schumann or Mendelssohn or Beethoven, you name it, you see a confirmation of the fact what Mason was saying, that these people were all like comparable to each other. There was a certain system that they were aware of. So when Kulak gives dotted half note 116, that's an original metronome mark from the 19th century in the context of that time, that we can be very sure about. That is that what Mason is referring to. This metronome mark would not be a surprise for Mason. So when he says Chopin's music is played way faster compared to his original intention, then we can have a debate if this dotted half note should be 120 or 112, but it's in that range. This is the point of departure for Mason. And so the question we have to answer now, based on this source, is how did people play Chopin in 1901? According to Mason, much faster than originally. The dotted half note 116 is original. And by that token, you take another piece of Chopin. Any piece of Chopin will work. Every etude will work. But for the sake of comparison, also to compare it with Alberto's version of the scherzo, which we are going to release very soon. Therefore, the email list is very important. Beginning of June, you will have a Kickstarter with 5 CDs of Chopin. All his scherzi, ballades, etudes, and his preludes in a box of 5 CDs, both digitally streaming and, of course, in CD version available. Anyways, that's as a side note. Okay, dotted half note 116. That's an original tempo that Mason referred to. Then we have a single beat option. That's how we think, how musicology today thinks that the metronome should be read, should be used. And we have a whole beat system. That's how we think inevitably those historical metronome marks have to be considered. So we take both ticks back and forth together. Then Trifonov is playing extremely fast at the end of the scherzo. We're gonna analyze the entire scherzo at another time. But at the end, where it says tempo primo, here in the coda, he is actually speeding up, and it's impressive what he is doing. He is reaching a tempo of 108. That's not single beat yet, but it's very close. We can, let's say we give him that. That is about single beat, right? Alberto is playing obviously half of that. Dotted half note 58. And then we're going to listen to these fragments. And you're going to answer me, which of those versions can we speed up so much that it's still humanly possible to be played? And I'm going to share Trifonov's version also, of course, with YouTube's ability of functionality to speed it up. And then you tell me if that is still possible. And we need to speed them up. Why? Because Mason, again, this is his original metronome mark. This is what he's referring to. According to musicology today, this is the speed that without any doubt Chopin really wanted you to play. While Mason say in 1901, people played so much faster than I'm going to write in my memoirs, that people are electrocuting Chopin. So we're not talking like, hey, there's 116 and you played in 118, so you're electrocuting Chopin. No, we're talking about like almost double the tempo, at least 50%. Can we agree on that? So here is Daniil Trifonov. And it's super impressive, as you can imagine, because he's one of the best players today. There we go. Okay, keep in mind, we're hearing 8 notes here. Huh? So if modern musicology is right, then 116, let's give Trifonov again this little margin. I mean, you have still to speed it up. Huh? It's almost 10%, and it's already super impressive. Then we're going to listen to Trifonov, and I mean, let's just put the playback speed at 1.5. That's just half faster. Then we get this. I mean, can we agree that this is absolutely not possible to do that? If we go back to his original speed. That's already like how can you go even much faster? So, okay, now we come to our poor Alberto, because he has to defend like a much slower performance. And that's hard. I can tell you that, because when you come from a fast performance, then going to a slower performance is always a little bit of a shock. We're going to listen to a larger fragment there, because you all ask for more music, and so I want to give you a few minutes of the end of the scherzo, so also to make you like familiar with that tempo. And then you have to ask you the question, when you listen to that, Alberto plays in 58. Which of those versions can we speed up so drastically that indeed Mason had reasons to complain in 1901 and talk about electrocuting Chopin? Well, the answer is, of course, obvious. There's only one version that we can speed up to become like almost double. Am I biased in favor of this conclusion? No, there is no other conclusion possible. There is none. There is no way. Again, I'm going to repeat myself 100 times, because I know from experience on YouTube, you have to be crystal clear. 1901, people are electrocuting, referring to original tempos of the mid-19th century. For instance, this one. And if you want me to do the exercise with other Chopin pieces, I'm more than happy. It will be the same outcome each and every time, except those pieces that people play still at whole beat. This is the norm. This is the norm for which we have to start. And then we think in a single beat perspective, being what modern musicology tells us and keeps telling us, and many musicians and conductors, that was the obvious way that people use their metronome. We come to a performance that is almost there. And then we have to ask, okay, electrocuting Chopin, his music is played much faster, starting from here to what? To some kind of Superman performance? It's never going to happen. It's not happening now. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen in 1901. Or we go the whole beat trajectory. We take 2 takes for 1. And then we come on, like if we convert that to a single beat metronome mark, we come at 58. And from this performance, here everything makes sense. Because there we have proof that we can reach 108. But we cannot reach 200 or something like that. It's never going to happen. And guys, while you're listening, just imagine if you can play this. 98% of you watching right now, and I know what I'm saying, will never be able to play this in the tempo Alberto's playing. It's just very difficult. It's not slow by any stretch of the imagination. It becomes slow because you have people like Trifonov and others who are pushing the boundaries so much that they are electrocuting Chopin. And we heard that version for over 100 years. So of course, you as a listener will have the impression like, yeah, but this, what Alberto is going to do is so much easier. Yeah, but easier compared to like the best of the best of the best of the best of the best. And by the way, Alberto would be able to do that as well. He belongs to one of the best. He just commits to this because he believes in that and he enjoys his time very much playing in this way. But this is still very difficult. Also, keep attention on the fact that he's using the pedal as indicated. Exactly. This is a Kulak score. I don't know if Kulak really sticks to Chopin's pedal markings everywhere. That I don't know. But the original one as published by Chopin is very important. Chopin was very strict on that. Don't think if you entered Chopin's class that you would be able to use a different tempo, different fingering, different articulation, or different pedaling. It wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. And today, in spite of the fact that everybody said you have to stick to the score because there's everything, we reject his metronome marks, we reject his fingerings, we reject his pedal markings. And if you are in a masterclass, just go online and check all the masterclasses. They will point to the score because there's everything there. And then when you would ask, sir, why don't you stick to the pedal markings by Chopin? They would say, don't be so dogmatic. It's true, right? Okay, with this out of the way, let's listen to Alberto. There we go. So, is this slow? Well, of course, the slower version cannot defend itself at first against a faster version. When you drive at the highway, especially if you live in Germany, and you leave the highway and you drive through a village now suddenly in 50 kilometers per hour or 30, you feel like standing still. It takes a while before you see like, okay, I'm seeing actually much more. And just imagine you drive with a speed of 100 or 150 kilometers per hour, and you see a lot of trees next to the road. It's all like one color. It's like you don't see the individual trees. You don't see the individual, but if you drive slower, you see the individual trees. And what is the fastest? When you can count all the individual trees, like ta 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 ta, obviously yum pom pom. So the pulse in faster performances, and that's actually something that Mason said himself. In too rapid playing, the effect of speed is lost. That's a strange saying, right? But this could be like, this is so Liszt. This could very well be from Liszt, like what Liszt told him. In too rapid playing, the effect of speed is lost. And then he gives the example also of the minute waltz, which was played way too fast in his mind. But like, think about that. And this is so true. Why? Why are slower performances? Why is Alberto faster than Trifonov in the perception? It's because of the pulses. With Trifonov, you come really to one beat every song. It's like a 4/4 time signature over 4 bars. In Alberto, you still hear the 3 bars, the 3 beats every bar. So if you count every quarter note in Alberto's performance, you end up much faster. The reason why you do not perceive that as such at first is because you also are in the excitement of Trifonov's performance. It's of course a lot of energy, but you have to ask yourself, where comes the energy from? And what am I buying with that? It's always the same. With Alberto, you have the nuances, you have much more layers of rhythmical layers, I would say. So, yeah, I hope this is a very clear story. I hope I did my best to bring the story as clear and as with my beautiful handwritten notes to you, to make you understand that this is another piece of the puzzle where single beat is just like abandoning sources like this. You have the picture of whole beat and the picture of the 19th century in single beat. This is again a beautiful centerpiece in that picture in whole beat. In single beat doesn't fit anywhere. And so what is musicology doing today? Just rejecting that, or just taking 1 or 2 sentences and say like, yeah, even Mason was part of the romantic culture. No, he really referred to people who witnessed Chopin. And we have those metronome marks. And if you think that Kulak is romanticizing music, well, then I have bad news for you, because Trifonov is 10% too slow. And if you say like, okay, well, we can play much faster than Trifonov, if only he wanted, don't think so. And you don't think so either. And so people sometimes say there is no proof for whole beat. Even in my comment section, people still debate that. People say, is there any proof? And then, of course, people fly in there. Like, no, of course not. We miss all flat earth. There's no fact. What is this? What is this? And it's not only Mason. Stories like him, we have a lot. Mason is very clear because of this connection with the original authentic performance practice of Chopin. And, of course, his impressive like a basket of people that he knew who were really in the center of the 19th century. Moscheles and both Liszt, both having written, and especially Moscheles, about the culture of speeding up that he didn't understand. I don't know how you can twist this story to a single beat perspective. And on top of that, I don't know, for the love of God, you tell me, if this source is not enough, if we only had this Mason source, that would be enough to at least doubt a single beat practice of single beat reading of the metronome marks in the 19th century very much. There is no explanation to justify that. You let me know in the comment section what you think. And as always, when you're still here, let me know with the timing of the video and I will give it a heart, because I appreciate that very, very, very much. Okay, link in the description box to my Patreon page. Don't forget that. It's super important. They enable me to do all that research. And if you want to just get a taste of such podcasts that we launch there, then there is a link to my email list as well for you, where you get one of these podcast versions for free. And with that out of the way, that's all I've got for you today. So thank you for watching, and we see each other very soon again. Bye.